guys, I'm Ashley, and in today's video I'm going to be doing my April 2016 wrap-up as well as my May 2016 TBR list. I might have overdone it for my May 2016 TBR. That being said, I am already currently reading 3 of these books and have already finished 1, so hopefully that helps with my gigantic list. Zito! And because there's quite a number of them for both months, I'm just going to go ahead and get right to it. The first book I read in April 2016 is Duskad, Essence of Life by Margaret Daly, and this was a gift from the author. She sent me an ebook copy of it in exchange for an honest review, so thank you, Margaret, for sending me a copy of your book. I ended up giving this book 3 out of 5 stars. This is the story of Ember. It has a family tragedy happen with her parents right in the beginning of the book, and her and her sister move away to try and escape the family tragedy, and she kind of stumbles upon these powers and these things that happen to her, and they have absolutely no explanation, and so this is her trying to come to terms with what's going on around her, what exactly she's experiencing. A lot of paranormal, there's a little bit of romance in it. I really liked the relationship between Ember and her sister, and as well as the relationship between Ember and 2 of her friends, Matt and Izzy. I'm really anxious to find out how she's going to go forward with the revelation that happened. This was a very short read. It was a novella. I read it in one sitting. If you like things that have Celtic elements or magical elements or paranormal, this would be a good pick up for you, and again, 3 out of 5 stars. The next book I read in April 2016 was The Sky is Everywhere by Jandy Nelson. I unfortunately only gave this book a 1.5 stars out of 5 stars. It was very hard for me to get into this book, let alone finish it. So this is the story of Lenny, whose sister Bailey has just passed away. She talks with her sister's boyfriend, or who was her sister's boyfriend, Toby, and she's also talking to the new guy at school, Joe. She's like torn between the 2 of them, and they both help her cope in different ways. She uses these boys to cope with it, and when I say uses, I stress uses heavily, like uses them in a bad way. And I think that the reason I had such a tough time with it was because of Lenny, the main character. I didn't care for her at all. I was very sorry for her and her loss of her sister, but I didn't like her voice. I didn't like her narrating. I wasn't a fan of any of her other conflicts she had going on or any of the other thoughts that she had, really. And as much as I wanted to like her, I just couldn't. This was kind of a letdown. Again, only 1.5 stars out of 5 stars. The next book I read was Shadow Kiss, which is the 3rd book of the Vampire Academy series by Rochelle Mead. I gave this book 4.5 out of 5 stars. I definitely can say without a doubt this is my favorite book so far of the Vampire Academy series. It follows Rose and Dimitri after the events in Montana, and Rose is seeing ghosts, and her and Dimitri are trying to figure out how to publicly and privately deal with their feelings. There's some threatening things happening to the school, St. Vladimir's, and Lissa is being recruited by the queen. This book was amazing. This furthered my love of Rose, and I really love Rose and Christian's relationship specifically in this book. They really start to like each other more and hang around each other more and respect each other. I just have so many emotions even just thinking about this book. The way it ended, this book was so good. I could not put it down. The next book I read in April was Will Grayson, which is written by both John Green and David Levithan. It follows the story of 2 Will Graysons. One Will Grayson is the best friend of this kid named Tiny Cooper, and the other Will Grayson is living with his mom in a like rundown apartment. They're both kind of having an identity crisis and growing up a little bit in their senior year of high school, even though it had some really funny one-liners in it and some sort of interesting introspections about life and love and growing up and being human and blah blah blah. I still didn't love it. I didn't like either Will Grayson, unfortunately. Didn't like John's Will Grayson. Was super one-dimensional and whiny and self-centered, and David Levithan's Will Grayson, even though he had more dimensions and was more emotional and interesting, again was also self-centered in a different way, and I know that's because he has some issues and that's why he was so like wrapped up in himself, but I think he was just too focused on one issue. He had only one sort of problem the whole book that he was trying to overcome, and it just felt very forced. He didn't feel like a real character. He just felt like this book fictional character. I didn't feel him at all. I didn't feel like he was fully fleshed out enough. I ended up giving this book 2.5 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was The Penelopiad by Margaret Atwood. This is a novella. It's a very short story, and it is a fictional retelling of the Odyssey, but from Penelope's point of view, Odysseus's wife. It follows her very briefly in the beginning of her life when she's a child, and her story with her father and her cousin Helen, and again very briefly on her marriage to Odysseus when that first happened, how it happened, but most of the story talks about her and her years on Ithaca for those 10 plus years without Odysseus, and even with Odysseus, and how she dealt with him being away, and her mother-in-law and all of the suitors that vied for her hand. This is the story of her and her maidens also, the maidens who helped her out while Odysseus was gone, and poses some questions about why they did what they did, how Penelope was able to avoid having to marry any of the suitors, and it's just a fictional sort of Penelope's point of view. It was good to be able to read something like that about the Odyssey. I know there's a lot out there for like Achilles and the Trojan War and the Iliad. I always am a fan of Greek mythological fiction, so this was a very good thing to pick up for me, and Margaret Atwood is a very prolific, very well-written author, and I am planning on reading more of hers. I've read The Handmaid's Tale before. I ended up giving this book 3 out of 5 stars just because at some points it was sort of satirical and humorous, and I don't think that it quite hit the mark on the humorous side. I think it should have been a little bit more straightforward instead of trying to be so like cutesy and self-referential, and even like made references to modern society, and I think she could have done away with that, and that really held me back from giving it a better rating. The next book that I read was An Age of License. This is a travelogue. It is graphic novel style. It's a autobiography, and it tells the story of Lucy and how she goes to France and Sweden and another place in France, and she does this like comic book convention in Switzerland. The back flap of the book described it as Eat, Pray, Love for a modern 20-something-year-old, and it was that. Like, that's a pretty accurate description. I didn't understand what the point of it was. Like, I do understand that she was trying to figure out who she, like what direction she was supposed to be going in life. I think she was about 24 or 25 when the events of this book happened, and I know she was trying to figure out which direction to go, and I know a lot of mid-20, 20-something-year-olds have this identity crisis, and that's why she wrote it, but it just felt a little bit light. It just felt like it didn't have any any depth to it. I felt like that's kind of a missed opportunity there. Again, I felt like it was an opportunity to really relate to 20-something-year-olds, and it could have, but it just didn't have enough in it for me to fully relate to it. So that's why I ended up giving it 2.5 out of 5 stars. The next book I read in April was This Raging Light by Estelle Lauer. I'm not sure how to pronounce her last name. I'm so sorry. But this was an amazing book. It was the only 5 out of 5 star rating I gave. It came at kind of a weird time for me, honestly. I had some family issues happen. I was reading it when the stuff happened, and maybe I shouldn't have, because it's really tough stuff that happens in this book, and it was just hitting a little too hard for me at that particular moment, but I did it anyway because I loved it so much and I couldn't stop reading it. I read it in 2 days total, even while everything else was going on, because I just couldn't put it down. So This Raging Light tells the story of Lucille, whose mother just ups and leaves, quits, decides to not be a mom anymore, decides she can't do it anymore. And her dad is already like put away in a mental health clinic, and her sister is only like 9 years old. Lucille has to take up all those responsibilities and take care of herself and her sister Ren, and pay the bills, keep up the house, keep up with her own schoolwork, keep up with Ren's schoolwork, and just function like that and tackle on all of those things. It's a really hard book to read because Lucille, as strong as she is, she's an amazing lead character. She is strong yet emotional and like feels everything and tries so hard, has all of her own interests and stuff, so she's very fleshed out, very interesting, very cool. And as amazing as that is, it just makes it tough to read because you root for her so much and she's trying so hard and is just so goddamn tired all the time, and the hits just keep coming for her in this book. Her best friend Eden is helping out, and Eden's twin brother Digby is also helping out, and there's some love angst happening between Lucille and Digby, which wasn't my favorite part of the book, honestly. I don't think it should have been done away with completely, but it maybe could have been dialed back and not as present in the novel. I think that with everything else Lucille had going on, the inclusion of her relationship with Digby didn't necessarily need to be there, but that might have been the whole point. Lucille herself had a lot going on, and she didn't want to have these feelings happen with Digby and didn't want to have all this love drama going on. She literally did not have the time for it, but it was happening anyway. So maybe that's a reflection of what's actually happening in Lucille's life. I just felt like it could have spent a little more time in other places instead of with the whole Lucille Digby thing, but neither here nor there because it was amazing. It's not very often that I read a young adult book about a character going through something like this, about neglectful parents, not dealing with only young adult problems, but dealing with adult issues too, and poverty and having to work that hard and money issues. So it was a really refreshing read because it actually felt so real, and all of the characters were super interesting. If you're looking for a emotional young adult contemporary novel, this is an amazing book. I cannot recommend it enough, honestly. And the last book that I read April 2016 was The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton. This is a classic novel. It's actually very short. I read this in audiobook form. It tells the story of Ponyboy Curtis, who has two older brothers as well as some other friends who are members of a sort of gang. They are what are called greasers, and they are fighting with the Socs, who are the upper sort of class people. They get in a rough spot with some Socs. It just tells the story of what it's like to be in that gang and live in that greaser life. It was a really great novel. I cannot believe it's taken me this long to finally get a hold of it and get through it. I ended up giving it 4 out of 5 stars. It had some amazing lines in it. I think that probably when S.E. Hinton was writing it, she wanted it to be a classic piece of literature, so she included these epic, sort of corny actually, lines about life. And now for the books that I'm going to read this month, May 2016. The first one is Pearl by Deirdre Riordan Hall, and this book was given to me by the publisher in exchange for an honest review. It tells the story of Pearl and her mother JJ, who are homeless and poverty-stricken, and something happens at another school in their town, and so she has a chance to sort of start over at this elite boarding school, and so she's trying to start over there and make friends and gain a new life. So she's trying to forget all of her mistakes and all of her mother's mistakes and just wipe the board clean and start over. And I'm planning on doing a full review of it once I finish. The next book for May 2016 is Beauty Queens by Libba Bray, which I'm also currently reading in audiobook form. This is the story of a group of Miss Teen Dream pageant girls, all 50, one from each state, and they're on their way to do some promotions for their pageant when their plane crashes, and they crash into this deserted island, and they have to fend for themselves, and this is the story of how they do that, how they survive on that island. So far, it is really funny with some surprisingly diverse characters. It's one of those books where you could either love it or hate it because it's very satirical and makes fun of itself. I don't think you could have a book with that story without making fun of yourself. You can't take yourself seriously when you're writing something like that. It's really entertaining so far. Next is the 4th Vampire Academy book by Rochelle Mead, which I believe is called Blood Promise. I just started this book and I'm planning on finishing it as soon as possible because I'm completely obsessed and immersed in feels, and I need to finish and I need to move on and find out what the heck is going to happen with Rose on the journey she's taking right now because she's going through some shit. So I'm planning on finishing that very soon and doing a very short review of it because I'm sure I will have feels that need to just vomit out of me. Next for May is Wild by Cheryl Strayed. This is my book club book of the month for my book club I have here. It's a autobiography travel narrative about Cheryl as she goes on the Pacific Crest Trail in United States, on the northwestern side of the United States, and all of the people she encounters and her journey towards self-discovery while on this trail. So I'm really looking forward to this. I've been meaning to read it for like forever, probably about 3 years now, so I'm glad to finally have the chance to read it. Next is The Girl Who Fell from the Sky, which I actually have already read and finished, so I will be doing a very short review of that, but that was technically on my May TBR list. I give this a very small rating, so I will be talking about that and why I gave it such a low rating. But yeah, this was a book that I planned on reading to May and did already finish. That's what I get for making this video a week into May. Maybe next time make your TBR video the first day of the month, Ashley. Next is the new Morgan Matson book, The Unexpected Everything. I plan on reading it this month because Morgan Matson is one of my absolute favorite young adult authors, and I cannot wait to get my hands on that freaking book. Next is the new Rick Riordan book, The Trials of Apollo, The Hidden Oracle. I am so freaking excited for this. I don't even know what to do with myself. The fact that we have another Rick Riordan book, and it's Apollo. It's like an actual Greek god. I'm probably going to read that one before I read the Morgan Matson book because, hello, it's Rick Riordan. And finally, we have Eligible by Curtis Sittenfeld. I actually received an advanced reader copy of this book a while ago and haven't read it yet, and did receive like a notice from the publisher that it's out now, so since you received a copy, please review it for us. So, going to be doing that this month. It is a retelling of Pride and Prejudice, and it's part of a series of retellings of Jane Austen. There have been some other ones by other authors. There's a new author for every retelling, and it's done by Curtis Sittenfeld, who also wrote American Wife. So I'm really looking forward to this. Any chance to read a Pride and Prejudice retelling is a go for me, so really looking forward to reading this month. You guys, that's so many books. I don't know if I'm going to do it. I'm really going to try because I really want to read all of these books specifically this month. So I'm really hoping to get through them all. Wish me luck, and let me know down below what books you guys are reading this month, what you thought of the books that I read in April if you've read them. And if you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe if you want to see more videos, and I'll see you next time. Happy reading!